Okay, so for those of you joining the room now, we're just going to give a minute or two for us to get a quorum, shall we say, that makes it worth going on. So just bear with us for a moment's silence. Okay, I think we'll get started then. My name's Damien, and this is my third session of the day, hosting one I've really been looking forward to just because of my personal interest in the world of surveillance. So we're going to be hearing from Yvonne and from Roz. And the title today is One Person's Transparency, is another person's surveillance, and vice versa. Which I think is provocative. And my first thought was, well, they're kind of the same thing, aren't they? It's obviously they're two very different things until I really started thinking about intent, identity, purpose. So we're going to take a kind of tour through how a positive intent, an action of positive intent, can snowball through a series of unintended consequences and ultimately end up being something very bad or not what it was intended to do, and of course vice versa. So Yvonne and Rose, if you could introduce yourselves and tell us what you're going to be talking about.
Yes, we are. So when we started this, we really had thought, well, that's a big topic. And what we found as we were doing it is that we sort of clustered around a couple of themes. And one of them is polyvocality, in the sense of just the multiplicity of voices involved in transparency and surveillance. Another one is really that it's like, we worry about what happens when surveillance goes wrong, but also what happens when, sometimes what happens when it goes right isn't really what anybody would want. Roz, do you have anything to add to that?
I've probably not got as much to add to that, because I think we'll probably cover it an awful lot in our talk. I'm Roz, and yeah, I've been part of things like Lean Agile UK for quite a few years, and I think I've been involved in Wardley mapping for something like 4 or 5 years now, and ran a session a couple of years ago, I think it was probably at Sadler's Wells, that was about mapping in a different kind of like a vein, and a different way of like, how's your team's maturity, and that's a bit of my background. I mean, I'm really excited about this topic because we were given it as something to talk about, and you can so relate to this because it is just something that you experience absolutely every day. The number of times that I hear people say, I've just seen something on my Facebook feed and I've no idea how on earth it got there. Why am I seeing an advert for this? It's like a miracle. Someone must have just like been listening to me. So it's just such an exciting topic that you can completely relate to. I don't know, maybe I should go, Damien, to just sort of like share the screen.
Go ahead. I wanted to flag one aspect, and I hope that you do cover it. It's been a while since we first sort of tried to have that interpretation session on this rather provocative title that Simon's put up, but it was also around the chaining of ownership, right? The you aimed the gun, I loaded it, somebody else pulled the trigger, so it wasn't me. So the way that we actually, I suppose, give authority to the people who are surveilling us, shall we say? But please dive in.
Yeah, it'll be a very, very like a brief screen share of the map and that kind of thing. So let me just try and see if I can get this to share nicely. So this is me and Yvonne. We started talking about drawing a map because obviously it's map camp and you've got to start somewhere. And we started talking about the kind of journey that you would actually have to go through if you were creating an application these days to be able to like monitor some content, and where you would actually start from looking at a person doing some human surveillance and moderating content into the journey of training models, and then moving all the way through to AI, so that you've removed that human element. Your time to publish has been dramatically reduced. And yeah, it gave us a kind of like a map to talk about. And one of the obvious huge powers of Wardley maps is that you do now have something that you're talking about and around, you can focus on, and then you can actually just see where that leads you. So we moved into our map. Apologies if you can't see that, the maps and everything will be available at the end of this session. And we talked about the need to go for people that were moderating content, and how you could use a Wardley map to see this transitioning into a product and more into a commodity phase, where you could actually sort of like, you know, start seeing this happen more in real time, because you're using a commodity to do the interpretation of the content that you're seeing and what direction it's going in, whether you actually want to publish it or whether it is something that needs to be parked, not necessarily going live on your website. And this started us talking into what you actually just feel and see yourselves. So we started talking about the couch. The number of times that you go online, and Yvonne, just bring it to life for us.
Oh, so I was once looking for a couch because I have cats and my couch needs to be replaced because we sit on it. And it's like so I looked for a couch, and then all I saw was ads for the couch for weeks. And it's like, you know what? I just don't care that much. Like, I bought it. It's fine. It's done. Like, why do I need to see ads for the couch for 6 weeks? It's like, okay, I bought it. Like, is there any way I can tell this surveillance system that it's like, I bought it, y'all can relax now, just let it go.
A lot of this is about like the data has been collected, and that collection of data just sort of like goes on, and it's now saying like Yvonne has definitely opted into tell me about a couch, and her preferences are give me more couches. But there isn't an easy way, particularly when you start thinking about the number of people that are now serving Yvonne pictures of couches, to say to all those guys, hey, definitely stop now, guys, with the couches. Start giving her rugs, start giving her something else, give her cat toys, anything else but couches, because she's getting it in from so many different sources. And this data has been sold or shared with so many other agencies that the data that she's probably actually just bought the couch and said, right, okay, this is now more private data that I've actually purchased this couch from someone, that just doesn't reach anywhere. Yvonne's profile and persona is now labeled as the lady who would like a couch.
Before we started, by the way, Damien and I were comparing bookshelves and talking about the things on our bookshelves, and we were talking about how we are both people who are hard to buy for. So once people get the idea that you're interested in a thing, then they give you lots of the thing. And so I have penguins, and Damien has Linux books that he does not need. So please do not give Damien more Linux books.
I do need a couch though, so if you can make a recommendation, I'm in the market.
No, okay, we'll send more couches your way, but unfortunately it might just be like that little bitty size sort of couch, Damien. Can't promise that we'll get a full one in the post to you. And an awful lot of this is still around, and I know that Jane asked us for a description of this talk, and we started talking about data promiscuity being a bit more like online dating. Yvonne, you had a really, really good kind of quote probably from like high school era.
Yes. As a child of the 90s, we had it inculcated into us that when you have sex with one person, you're not just having sex with that person, you are having, like their entire sexual history is with you, because, this was the age of AIDS, and before there were reliable medical treatments for it. And data has something of that same kind of shadow where, as somebody who has worked for companies doing machine learning, you collect data and you intend for it to be used a certain way. And then it turns out then somebody else in another part of the company or another team is like, oh, well, since you're already collecting data, can we use it to enrich this other thing? And it kind of takes on a life of its own. I mean, that it's like they're all of a sudden way more, you started out to do this one very specific thing, and all of a sudden, like it's just gone places. And that's only the people you can see. That there are often effects on people that you cannot see. Is this a good time to talk about the Apple roller coaster?
I thought it might be a good time to actually talk about the lady whose medical photos might have ended up in the wrong kind of place.
Oh, yes. So we do have references, and so I tried to hunt down news articles for all of these, but there is an artist who was looking at AI art, and she realized partway through that she found photos of herself that were private medical photos that had been taken in the course of a medical consultation. So, it should be private, it should be protected, and yet somehow it had made its way into this AI training set. And, and of course, as an AI artist, she was just sort of like, she went down a journey to try to figure out, like, how did this happen? Why did this happen? What is all of this? That it's like, it's like, I'm in the US, we have HIPAA here. Like, this is not supposed to happen. And, yet somehow it did.
And on the back of that as well, I think that looking at the GDPR laws that we have in the UK here, when it comes to anything like a photo asset, it's got to be tagged in the metadata with that person's actually sort of PII. So that if you did do a GDPR request to have like any kind of images from you removed from somebody's web servers, they would have to be definitely in the metadata. The actual your name would have to appear. Otherwise, that's still a valid image that could be in public use and could be used to train AI models. The other interesting piece from that article that Yvonne was talking about is there was basically the question of, can you ask AI to just unlearn that particular set? Now, if I was talking about machine learning, I would be in a position where I could say to machine learning, right, okay, now just train using an entirely different set and omit those pictures from the machine learning sort of like base data trained model, and hopefully like omit those surgery images that she wants to keep private and doesn't want to be used in this kind of way. But I'm not really aware, and I'm not an AI expert in any way, shape or form, of any way that you can say to AI, please just unlearn this bit and just pretend that you never saw it, go off in a different direction now.
Yes, and the story of how it got into, how her, that it's like, it was sort of a story of, roughly, results being sold from, one company to the next company, to the next company, to the next company, and, to the next user. And so the people who are actually publishing, the AI art, just like, they had like, on some very real way, they have no idea how they got this, right? And that is, I mean, as a user of, as a, like that, I mean, that's disturbing in and of itself, but that there isn't a good way to say, wait, I've changed my mind, or even I didn't change my mind. Like, I assume that this is going to be private, and I still want it to be private. That it's like filing a takedown notice throughout all of this entire chain of companies is just really well. So it
it's probably not viable, is it, Yvonne? Really,
I was thinking of the data hygiene exercise that a lot of us go through, where we go through data brokers and try to erase our you know, and try to say, okay, like, you don't need to publish my address. It's fine. Just take it down. And, you know, and it's like, and I, a person, have to go through all of them individually to say, please take my address down, even though, you know, like, they're probably selling data to each other. They're probably getting data from similar sources. And it's like, but I can't just go back to the source and say, okay, go tell them, you know, like, you know who you sold it to, go tell them I don't want this out there. Like, I have to go through, and that's a lot of labor. One of the things that we were talking about is how this whole process really kind of rhymes with dating, and especially online dating, where, you know, you have to do this presentation of yourself, and it's a lot of work. And then you have to do all this vetting, and that's a lot of work. And sometimes there's this misalignment that it's like, you might enter into a, you know, you might want to enter into a relationship with somebody, you know, with using your data, but they just see you as a transaction. I don't know how many people in this room are incredibly online like I am, but in January of this year, there was a story about a young man who had engaged in just sort of typical young man bad dating behavior with a lot of women who were all on TikTok, and who all discovered that he was dating them and treating them badly in exactly the same way. And so, and, you know, they figure, like, he has a distinctive first name. If you Google, like, it's in the references. I don't want to drop more on him, but he is, you know, but he was like, he became a TikTok sensation for a couple of weeks because like, all of these, like, all these women were like making up songs about him and stuff like that. And it's like, that is like, that feels like a very data thing, that it's like, you know, like, you know, it's like, you do these things and somehow somebody collects all this stuff about you, and it just snowballs beyond.
It was also a piece of, that piece felt like very much like the sort of like the Angela Lansbury type piece of, I'm just going to go and do amateur detective work now. And
yes.
They were also getting in touch with his employer and saying, like, how could you employ somebody who's ghosted these women? And he basically just put his heart out there, and his heart out there on the line, and not actually just realize what could happen as a consequence.
Yeah, and that, you know, and it's not exactly the same thing, but because I'm really enamored of this idea of data promiscuity, that, you know, it just kind of does what it does and what it wants to do. You know, what, you know, left to the ecosystem, everybody would have so much data about all of us, and they do have data about all of us. And it's, you know, and it's like, even, you know, as a person who has worked on these kinds of systems, it's very hard to stop that data shadow. Like, even if you try really hard, like, so many incentives just push against it. And there's so many things where you end up having the, oh, well, you know, it's like, well, what about this? Is this an okay, like, I know we didn't collect it for that, but can we use it for this? And it's like, okay, well, you seem like a trustworthy person, sure. And then, you know, and then you have data everywhere.
So if I started talking about the other case, which I think we started talking about, like, use cases of like how data can be, or rather, you may have a purpose. You've got a good intent when you're actually entering into the relationship with whoever this is. And we started talking about people who fall, and devices these days that can detect a fall. And you might find yourself just starting out very, very sort of like very, very low key. In the UK, you'd be working probably with age concern and getting a band around someone's arm that's got a panic alarm and can detect that you've fallen. But you might also think, do you know what? I'm going to get Grandad an Apple Watch, because now he's got something like a watch as well as something that is a device that can detect that he's fallen, you know, something that is a bit more dual purpose. And it might not be, it could be a Fitbit, it could be absolutely anything. But we started talking about the fact that what you're now actually opting into and putting together with the terms and conditions of the device is you might be sharing a lot more maybe about your location data. You want to know where someone's fallen, given. You want to know this sort of like accelerometer. I can't say it anymore, my teeth have fallen out. That basically is just detected that you've moved very, very fast towards the ground and then stopped very suddenly. And then Yvonne was finding a really nice, interesting case. So tell us about the roller coasters.
So this is amazing. That there's been this giant news story over the past couple of days or week about how the latest the latest set of Apple devices can detect, they have a feature that is supposed to detect if you have been in a car crash and immediately page out to 911 if they think that you've been in a car crash. Well, it turns out that to the Apple devices, there's a strong resemblance between being in a car crash to being on a roller coaster in an amusement park. And so emergency services have been getting these false alerts from people's devices saying, oh my God, my person's been in a car crash, you have to go rescue them. And it's like, well, no, they've been on a roller coaster. And so this is interesting for all kinds of reasons, because one suggested fix for this is, well, just tell them if you're going to be on a roller coaster. And I had, and it's like, I have, like, this is a bunch of labor, right? I mean, like you're at an amusement park. The point of an amusement park is to have fun. Like, do you really want to think about, oh, I should tell, some software developer out there that I'm going to be on a roller coaster so that they don't call 911. This is not how people think. This is not how people work. And on the other hand, it's like, well, how would they know without more surveillance? I mean, you could do something around geofencing. You could do then it's like, okay, but that is so don't page out to emergency services when you detect crash data from this geo area, unless there's a lot of it, in which case, yes, call out the paramedics.
You definitely don't want to have a car crash into a roller coaster then in that case.
Right, because that's
mixed data.
The data would be very upset. It would not. And then people would have long conversations about, well, okay, so this was an anomalous event, but it's a low frequency event that could happen again. And we are notoriously bad about reasoning about low frequency events, but at the same time, it's also just sort of like, now what do we do? I mean, like on all sides.
I'd say another area that we were just also talking about and covering around this topic was almost saying how you opt out of pieces and the amount of effort that we now have to go into to say, I'm interested in hearing about this particular topic, but not in this particular topic. So something like the kind of Facebook, these are my interests, these are activities that I'm not interested in, and this kind of like ever-growing list that you now have to maintain, and the actual maintenance of what is becoming your data and your kind of data footprint in the world. So obviously these days when you get some new piece of software, you now sort of get asked, like, do you want to have targeted advertising? Because this could be really, really great and the best thing that's ever in your favor. We're going to know that we're going to almost like predict that you need a couch, or that you need now like a footstool to go with a couch, because we've analyzed all your data and it's absolutely awesome. Here you go. But for the same thing, you can obviously opt out these days and say, no, just keep me as an anonymous person. I'm absolutely fine giving me random ads that you present to me because you don't know what I'm interested in. But that also then gives me less of a housekeeping headache of constantly going and updating what I'm interested in, what's my preferences, and saying, don't show me ads of this type because I only looked at my mother's falling device for 2 minutes, so you don't have to give me every other device known to man. I was looking for somebody else's birthday present. I wasn't looking for me.
Yes. And just the amount of that, like, I don't know if people have gone through and ever tried to curate the giant list of things that Twitter says you might be interested in. So they're going to push targeted ads at you. And it's just sort of like, okay, first of all, I don't know how most of these things got on this list. And second of all, it's like 10 pages long. I I don't want to read all of this. And I don't really want to read all of this more than once. If you said, okay, look, if you do it this once, it'll be great, then no, it's not true. I mean, it's a total lie. And none of us thinks, oh wait, that it's like, I haven't updated my Twitter list in a while, I should go and do that. It's like, I mean, half the people I know carefully click do not, like they say they care about security, but whenever something pushes a new OS update and they're like, do you want to accept this update? And it's like, no, I don't, because you will break something. So yeah, no, we are not going to volunteer to know, to tell Twitter, oh, you know what, I used to be interested in that and now I'm not. But it's like, from Twitter's point of view, right? Like the way that okay, the way that we then have to feed you better ads is to surveil you more, right? So that we can feed you better ads. And there's no way to say, well, how about not at all? Right? Like, just how about like you just don't, I don't care about your ads, just don't give them to me. I mean, you can install blockers, you can do a lot of things around that, but that is also labor. Like maintaining a system that keeps you from just seeing the random things that people decide to push in your way is also work. And it is work that, sometimes you end up doing it for a household, and that's sort of like, I don't know, I don't really want to be the privacy administrator for my household.
We've got a comment in the chat from Anne Bergin. Some of the things in that list on Twitter include words of muted, right, which describes a bigger picture. I think I said this to you both when we first sort of tackled this issue, and it was, how bad is Twitter, considering how much data they do have, how bad is Twitter actually serving us ads? Given that it's just really bad.
One of the things that I think that we actually covered first of all was, when we started talking about the map of, if you are trying to move from this human being doing the person that's doing the monitoring and seeing what's actually viable and what should be shown and what shouldn't be shown, is that you can enter this phase of machine learning where they almost want to keep that data alive for a while, even though a human moderator would have said, don't show Yvonne that ad, really just don't show Damien that ad, because they want to know that the model's working correctly, so that they can then just keep on moving into the next phases in their chain. So sometimes I think that we see a lot of false positives because the machine learning models haven't been updated, new things are coming along, and it's just not necessarily been retrained, or that they're still going through a bit of a trial period with it to see whether it is actually screening out the right stuff. Yeah,
or that like this gets very contested in areas like especially around hate speech and content moderation, where that it's like, I cannot find the news story, so I will try to be careful about how I quoted it. But there was speculation at one point about certain kinds of speech not being pulled from websites because of model training. And I do not know if that is true, or if that is just a hypothetical that got out of control and turned into a rumor. But it seemed very believable to me, as somebody who has worked for companies where there's always this fight between, okay, we want to train the model, and okay, but is this really how we want to handle the data? Like I, a person, would just look at that and be like, no, of course not, don't show people that. And yet there is and yet like the model has to learn somehow, and the model has to be constantly updated, which sort of which started us on the subject of like the harms to the human moderators involved in all of this. I mean, like, yes, of course, we don't want people to have to see a lot of the truly terrible things that it is the job of a content moderator to weed out. And at the same time, it's like, how terrible would it be to be told, oh yeah, you flagged this, but we're just going to leave it there because we need to see if the model finds it and does the right thing.
And so, wow, so interesting. There are some areas, so I was going to ask the question, where is the biggest problem? Is it with things that are designed with good intent done badly, right? So say for example, the Twitter example, is it things that are done with bad intent deliberately, and things that were not intended to start off with? Like, where would you say, which of those buckets do you think the biggest problem lies in?
I tend to think that the biggest danger from Big Brother is not so much anything that Big Brother intends to do, but that he can just sit on you without even noticing. And there is no way to adjust that or correct it or anything. It's like, you were squished, and Big Brother is like, oops, sorry. It's like, wait, was something there?
I'd agree that it's kind of like your third bucket of your data started out with the good intended use, but unfortunately it's now just moved on through a chain of where everyone said, like, like, I'm trustworthy, give me that data, I'll merge it with my data set. It's becoming part of a bigger data lake. And all of a sudden it's being used for something that we never had considered the intended use for in the first place. And the terms and conditions that we probably gave that data away with were so loose that there's nothing you could do about it.
And
yeah, there's a maturity of the governance side as well, that probably we built tools at a time where we didn't quite see where some of these problems might emerge. So we almost need to almost revisit the governance side iteratively.
Yeah, and we also talked a lot about, if in the US, if when you receive spam phone calls, if they actually come from a person, right, which they might not, you have the option of saying, put me on the do not call list. You can't say, don't call me. You have to say the magic words, which are put me on the do not call list, which in this context, it brings up the need to keep track of people don't want to know about that, right? Like people, that it's like, you have to keep track of the people who you exclude for some reason, as well as the people that just sort of get squished around in your data lake. And that is also a hard thing. Like, is that data that also travels along with with the sale or acquisition of all of this other data about all of these other people? And how does that work? And how does that get maintained? And how does that get governed? So, there is this tiny bit of surveillance where even if you try to do the right thing, it's like, you now have this thing that has to travel alongside, the rest of the data, the amorphous data blob. And it's hard to deal with this very clear-cut thing and this very, large thing where, you're not, that is kind of unbounded, like side by side. That's actually pretty hard.
There are some nuanced challenges. YouTube tends to be quite good at serving me videos I'm interested in. However, it can't work out. I like Arsenal, I like Gary Neville, and I like football. But I never want to hear Gary Neville talking about Arsenal that I'm happy with him talking about. And this is to do with the individual, his particular bias towards a club. And there's no way easily, but I think I can tell, without specifically just coding that in. I don't think there's a way that an algorithm can easily understand that without really being human-like. It's in its understanding of each one of those areas. But well, actually, first thing, there are some questions, comments in the chat. We've reached the point where, when in this chat, it's always been open to questions, but feel free to sort of post anything in. I'll highlight some. There was a nice one from Barbara.
I'm just gonna see us. I'll switch to the slideshow thing just because we've got we will share our slides that have got the references that we've talked about in this one. Although one or two bits and pieces we just couldn't find, so sorry. And yeah, it is time for Q&A, so I will stop the share, but we will obviously as part of Map Camps share the slides that have got like the references that we've looked at here. So yeah, back to the questions, Damien.
No problem. So there was one quite early on from Vesna Vukovic, which was what makes a set of data identifiable as ours. She said as ours, I think she means as ours, and in brackets unique.
That is a really complicated and interesting question. I know that round about 2007, 2008, there was a giant study presented at, I don't remember whether it was ACM or IEEE, but it was one of those where it turned out that people are just not as good at anonymizing data as we think we are. Like we sort of have this idea that it's like, oh, you're in this giant data set, so you must be anonymous. And it's like, well, actually, you might be anonymous within that data set, but you become way less anonymous when that data set is combined with another giant data set. And so it's like, so which is interesting, right? Because it's like, well, if you don't want to be identified at all, then both data sets somehow have to keep track of that. And which, on one level, I am fine saying, well, I'm a person and I don't want to be identified. So y'all go ahead, you go do that. But the answer to that is likely to be complicated and technical and involve a lot of detail and a lot of governance and a lot of arguing. And the end result, it's not so clear that it would, it would probably define a law or a set of laws or a policy, but would it have the intent that I as a person actually want? Because like those things define the floor, not the ceiling.
Well, I wanted to go back to the idea of this chain. So we described this chain problem, and I was wondering whether you thought that technology could be an enabler, right? So say, for example, the original person or the original entity that takes a picture of my face that's on my phone. Let's say I've chosen to upload it for some cool app that will make me look 50 or something, I don't know. And I upload it, and there's a responsibility on that first vendor, whatever happens to that bit of data down the chain. So what we have now at the moment is, hey, we sell it to you and that's your responsibility and those are the bounds, and I trust that you will do the same. Is there a way we can use technology to kind of manage that chain of supply?
It would be nice if we could do something that was almost sort of like stamping the originator of that piece, but is that originator actually still going to be trading by the time that your data is being handed into the wrong hands? In the case where the medical records were used, it was felt that the person had gone to a closed surgery, and I think that I might be wrong, but apologies if I am, in saying that the doctor had passed away since this person with the AI art had found her records had been found. But there's a very good chance that's what's happened there is that the data, that surgery could have been swallowed by a bigger collection of surgeries that didn't have access to a A4 piece of paper with a handwritten squiggle that said, I do not give my consent for this to be used elsewhere. It's not tied to that record of a photo. And therefore that data has then sort of proliferated itself along the chain or snowballed across the chain. You can trace it, obviously, she's managed to trace it all the way back to the surgery and the piece of paper that says, I do not give my consent for this to be used in any way, shape or form. But there's still nothing actually tying that piece of paper to the image itself. So you might find something that is in the chain and then stamped back to the originating source. But is that person still there to actually just take any action against? And can you find the number of imprints of that picture that are now spread across all the other data sources and have been used in a different way? Technology might help you actually just try and sort of like almost find that DNA chain just going around everywhere, but it would be still tricky to do. All you need is a few servers somewhere in a data center switched off and you've got a different problem on your hands again.
Yes, and one thing I want to call out is that we keep using the metaphor of chain, which as in supply chain, and there is, I mean, like there's been a lot of academic work around supply chains and what they do and what they don't do, but the piece that I would like to recommend is by Dr. Miriam Posner in Logic Magazine, and it's called See No Evil. And what she talks about is how supply chains are about moving boxes around without caring about the contents of what is inside the box. And that is what they do. And it's a fascinating article and something that I took from it as a person who works in software and thus has to be concerned with chains of provenance, of dependencies and so forth, is that a lot of this work that we do around trying to guarantee what is inside those boxes in the software world, it's like we are pushing against what the supply chain is supposed to do. And that is like, it's not impossible, but that's a really hard job, especially if we want to do it without disrupting what the supply chain is supposed to do and that it does really well.
Well, so I want to ask something. It's probably unfair to do this, but what
You're going to do it.
How do we factor in user apathy in this problem? And by the way, I need to tell you the story, right? I'm in a group chat with 150 of my great grandfather's progeny, shall we say, and all our parents. And it's just a group chat. Most of them are in Tanzania or Kenya. And we repeatedly have people posting things that actually are, so what was it? The US diversity visa lottery thing was run recently. Somebody posts a link. It's to a website that has a URL ending in XYZ. And I think it was games.fun.xyz. And of course I look at it and, this is crazy. But of course they shared it in a group chat where the majority of people had less ability to actually curate and see that as a bad link. And of course, these are people who are going to go and upload personal details, passport photos, really. So I just thought, my gosh, this is horrific. Of course, I went in and did the right thing, and I said, this is the wrong link, this is the correct link, this is what you do, which of course annoys everybody, particularly the people who posted. So there is this social aspect that people often seems to be getting in the way of people wanting to use things. Similar, I think I've come across people talking about the blue, I'm an Android user, so I don't really get this, but the blue bubble versus green bubble for iOS users. And apparently it's a thing. Kids don't want to move off iOS because of, we don't want to move platforms, shall I say. I'm not saying one is safer than the other, for a reason that's really nothing to do with whether the platform's good for them. So how do we broadly deal with or consider user apathy in this?
I think we should design for people like that. I mean, I'm a person like that. I have just gone on record as saying, I don't want to curate my giant list of interests with Twitter. And I don't actually, I never actually wanted to curate the list of people that I talk to on Facebook the way that I would if I were, working with an enterprise application with role-based access. And it was my job to curate that. That it's like, I think a lot of the trouble with this stuff is it's kind of implicitly based on an enterprise model where somebody gets paid to care about that. And it's like we are users. We do not get paid to care about a lot of stuff. So I think that the that impulse to make more work for the user, I think we need not to do that. Like, I think that they're, you know, on some level, I think we have to declare our values.
I agree. The user advocacy side of things as well. Maybe they should be taking a lot of a bigger stance on people opting out and actually proactively opting into the interest that they want to see. I appreciate that doesn't give the marketing revenue and the advertising revenue that they want. But yeah, this is about understanding the user base, and there's a piece here around the ethics and being able to actually say, I'm not going to abuse your trust. I'm going to act in the way that is right for you to be one of my customers.
Yeah, and I mean, lastly, I know we're really up to time. I don't know where 45 minutes has gone. That was brilliant. But in fact, any bits of advice, there isn't anybody in today's audience who doesn't, to some degree, have an issue with surveillance versus transparency. So I wonder if you can give us a takeaway, an action we could all take and make that will help us in this regard, either in just understanding better or actually tackling the potential harms to us.
If you want an action, I'd say go and just do yourself a nice little reverse image search of yourself and just have a see what that throws up, and just understand if you've got any leaks of your own.
Yes.
No.
I mean, I think we need to add that to our list. Like, you know, once a year, go through the giant list of data brokers and say, nope, don't want that out there. Don't want that out there. Don't want that out there. And it's horrible that we have to keep doing this. And it is horrible that you can pay a lot of money to have somebody else do it for you. Like, that is totally worth it to some people. And, you know, that it's like, yeah, I don't think I can do better than Roz's quick win of do a reverse image search of yourself.
Yeah, that's something maybe I've never done. And I'm fascinated now. Every time I change my password, by the way, I run my old password literally just through search, and it's incredible where it pops up as a search item, not as a, hey, you've turned up on a database, but where I'll just find a web page and it's a list of words and somewhere down there. And this is quite a sort of complex machine-y password, not a human sort of readable thing. So super interesting. The absolute last thing, so on that difficulty, I've done that before, 300 or so providers clicking through one by one. I don't know which things I want I'm actually breaking by going in and saying no, no, no to all of these providers. How much of that experience is by design? And what I mean is the crap experience of you've got to go through and it's a huge, huge job. And again, could technology be an enabler to making that a better experience for people?
I'd say, yeah, get some UX designers in to actually just make that a much better experience. And maybe they could do some grouping that says, like, do you want to opt out of all these bits and pieces that are, I don't know, sites related to Gary Neville and Aston Villa or something. So yeah, I think that the UX guys could do us some big favors in making life a lot better.
And somebody has to prioritize that, which means somebody has to see a profit model in it, which is why you can pay a lot of money and have somebody else curate that for you. So you know, it's like Italy at some point, like I think in the 90s, where like people would actually pay people to like negotiate the bureaucracy for them because it was complicated and weird and local and all of this stuff. And yeah, but you know, so now you have this group of middlemen who also know a bunch of things about you too.
Well, no, listen, we're being kicked out. Thank you so much for this talk. Really thought-provoking again. We're going to need to wrap up. And thanks so much for everybody who joined and for your questions. Yeah, last action, go do that reverse image search on yourself. Everyone's got, what, 12 minutes until the next talk. Let's try it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Dave, and thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Gurley.
Thank you.
Bye.